Earth know that the issue is to preserve her, but also to increase her beauty, and to give back what has been taken from her by sheer brutal exploitation.
The three panelists this evening are John Seed, who is an international known rainforest activist and founded the Rainforest Information Center in Australia. Since 1979, he has been involved in international organizing that has resulted in the protection of rainforests worldwide. He is the co-author of Thinking Like a Mountain Towards a Council of All Beings. We welcome John. Lynn Margulis is a distinguished university professor in the Department of Geosciences at the University of Massachusetts, right here in our own area. She was elected to the National Academy of Sciences in 1983 and received from William J. Clinton the Presidential Medal of Science in 1999. She is best known for her theory of symbiogenesis and is also acknowledged for the contribution to Jim Lovelock's Gaia concept. And to the third member of our panel is Stephen Buhner, who is the earth poet and award-winning author of 10 books on nature and indigenous cultures, environment, and herbal medicine. Stephen's works includes The Secret Teachings of Plants and Healing and Natural Healing and Prevention. So we welcome our panelists tonight. And in order to have the focus, we gave each of the panelists 2 questions. Question number 1 is, what have been the effects in your life of recognizing the Gaian interconnection and intelligence as real phenomena, as expressions of how the world truly functions? How has it impacted your perceptions of human beings, non-human life, the environment, and your work?
There's a great poem by the poet Robert Aiken that says, "Watching gardeners label their plants, I vow with all beings to practice the old horticulture and let plants identify me." The movement into understanding Gaia as a living intelligence forces a change in orientation that is substantial. I think it's too often forgotten in the drive to develop sophisticated Gaian understandings that relationship with the earth is at root a feeling thing, not a thinking thing. Of all of the difficulties I have faced personally and that I think face us as a species, this is, I believe, one of the hardest, the changing of personal orientation from mental constructs, from theoretical analysis and thought to feeling. For in so doing, we experientially encounter a basic conflict of cultural values and assumptions within which we are daily immersed, specifically that feeling is inferior to thinking. We have lost, as James Hillman comments, the response of the heart to what is presented to the senses, and that loss can be seen daily in the environmental devastation of our world. It can also be seen, though it is somewhat harder to perceive, in a concomitant devastation of our interior worlds. Part of this is that we often denigrate our capacity to feel or apologize for its emergence. More seriously, we no longer understand that feeling can be raised to the same level of sophistication as thinking, that the heart is an organ of perception and cognition equal and perhaps superior to the brain in its capacities. For its use automatically engenders empathy with as well as understanding of complex ecosystem interdependencies. Its use automatically involves caring. This caring itself is crucial. It allows the emergence of complex understandings not accessible to the brain. Some things have to be felt to be seen. As Barbara McClintock commented about her work with corn transposons, you must have a feeling for the organism. And as George Washington Carver said, anything will give up its secrets if you love it enough. This internal shift has been the primary effect in my life of recognizing Gaian interconnection and intelligence as real phenomena. It is, I think, the fundament upon which deeper insights about Gaia and complex Gaian interdependencies rests. Years ago, Brooke Medicine Eagle said to me, "My teachers have told me this, the trees are the teachers of the law. And as I grow less ignorant, I begin to understand what they mean." I love that statement not only for the depth of perception about trees and their ecosystem function, but because I have found that the journey into Gaian understandings continually involves growing less ignorant. Much of what I've been taught, I've found, is untrue. The knowledge base gained from technological schooling is itself more often than not an ignorance that must be abandoned. And once I truly allowed myself to go into nature and see what was there for myself, the world I found bore little relationship to the one I was taught about in school. For instance, 20 years ago I was sitting with a particular plant, a lichen called Usnea. And one day as I was sitting with the plant, I entered a waking dream state. And in the dream, I saw a young man walking toward me. And when he got closer, I could see that his hair was actually the pale green lichen itself. And his eyes were not young eyes, but very old indeed. He walked up to me very close and looked into my eyes, and he said, "You've been sitting with me in a good way. And I just wanted to tell you that the reason why Usnea works for your lungs is that it's medicine for the lungs of the planet, the trees. I just wanted you to know that." And then he turned around and walked away. I found as time went on that this kind of experience was common to people in indigenous and ancient cultures, that all indigenous medicine people who were asked were clear on this point. Their knowledge of plant medicines and of subtle ecosystem interactions came directly from the plants and ecosystems themselves, not from trial and error experimentation. Usnea is, as it turns out, an exceptionally effective antibacterial, long used for human lung infections, amongst other things. But that experience opened up a great deal more for me than the knowledge of one plant's medicine. Usnea is as well a potent immune stimulant and antibacterial for trees. This was the first time I realized that plant medicines had been doing something over their millions of years than simply pining away for our emergence. It stimulated me to begin looking at ecosystem interactions in new ways. I began to look for subtle plant interactions in ecosystems. And I was also deeply motivated to alter my primary method of gathering information about the world and humanity's place within it. This experience led to a recognition that human beings have the capacity for depth perception of nature without going through reductionist methodologies. There was, in fact, within that one experience, years of thought and a great many implications and questions. For instance, human beings are only a small part of a very complex ecosystem that has been going on a very long time. Improper beliefs are definitions about the superiority of human beings leads inevitability to non-sustainable behaviors. What is the ecological function of the human species? Gaia expresses species to fulfill specific purposes. Why were we expressed, and why is no one asking this most important of all questions? Plants and all things are intelligent and aware and can communicate with human beings, as Pythagoras and so many indigenous peoples have said. In other words, plants, animals, and ecosystems have interiority and point of view. Making contact with the interior worlds of other members of the Gaian system depends upon how they are approached. The capacity for such contact is inherent in the human species and is not limited to those in ancient and indigenous cultures. People such as Thoreau, Luther Burbank, Goethe, McClintock, Carver, Fukuoka, and so on used it routinely. And of course, for me, the learning has not stopped. Years after that experience with Usnea, I was living in a place where major logging was occurring. Over time, the air began to dry out. Intense fires started. The remaining forest burned so hot the soil was baked 2 and 3 feet deep, and entire trees flash burned. The next spring, a particular plant, wild lettuce, appeared growing through the forest like a field of wheat. It is a plant that grows in that region, but never in such abundance. It has traditionally been used, much like a mild opium, to stop pain, to soothe, to help sleep. It is used to help damaged lungs, from dry, irritated coughs to wasting lung diseases such as TB. It has been used historically to help the pain of burns. It only grew in abundance that one year and only in that area. The poet Dale Pindell talks about it like this: though the gods have the power of speech, more often they prefer a flower or plant. Elder leaves pressed on a blotter are spring buds emerging from a winter stem. These messages they send so ordinary we often miss them. In easy laughter and lightness, our legs casually crossed and touching, the way a serpentine dike blends seamlessly into bedrock, or the way two possible lovers move, starting and stopping, passing and pausing on an April trail. The subtlest oracles are always the most obvious, seeing what's right in front of us the most difficult. I experienced Gaia as intelligent, highly so, and I experienced the earth as continually giving me the opportunity to see what is right in front of me, if only I will learn what I think I know. In a sense, each of us that develops this kind of relationship with the earth inevitably becomes subsumed by what our species thinks it has conquered. We become the servant of something much larger and older than ourselves, and it is in that moment when we learn that surrender is not defeat that we truly begin to learn. Nothing after that is ever the same again. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to be here with people whose work I admire so much. I started as a rainforest activist in 1979, and at first was mainly working with direct actions for the defence of rainforests in our home state of New South Wales, and then later in where the subtropical rainforests are, later in Tasmania with the temperate rainforests, and far north Queensland, the tropical rainforests. And those actions were extremely successful because in those early days the society hadn't developed any antibodies yet to the kinds of theatrical hijinks of people climbing into trees and chaining themselves to machinery, and so our efforts were crowned by national parks and World Heritage listing. But as we learned what was happening to the rainforests worldwide, as we learned that they are the very womb of life and home to more than half of the species on Earth, and as we learned how fast they were disappearing year after year, the satellite photographs showed them eroding away, we realised that it wasn't going to be possible to save the rainforests one forest at a time, that unless we could address the underlying spiritual disease that afflicts modern human beings and allows us to think that we can somehow profit from the destruction of our own life support systems, our actions were bound to be just symbolic. And in any case, something's saved only until somebody decides to do something else with it in the future, and unless there's a radical change in consciousness amongst human beings, nothing's going to stay saved for very long. So this struggle to save the earth was really impacted by my running into the philosophy of deep ecology and also the Gaia Theory, when I realised that the earth was actually fine, and possibly the Cenozoic era was in trouble, but this was merely the 6th mass extinction, and Gaia had made her way blithely through the previous 5, on one occasion losing fully 95% of all of the species 230 million years ago, and everything that we know and love radiating forth in dazzling creativity from the remaining 5%. And so that was actually a tremendous relief for me, although I am a Cenozoic patriot and have a strong attachment to human beings and other endangered species of the present time. Nonetheless, the ability to get a bigger picture than the one that I'd had before was extremely important, and I found myself taking refuge in that bigger picture and rooting myself in that bigger picture to get the strength and empowerment I needed in order to return to my present incarnation with a vengeance. I had the good fortune to meet James Lovelock several years ago. It was almost like a pilgrimage. He's a really old man now, and I went to see him at his home in England, and we spoke about the rainforests, and he said that what we're doing to the rainforests is as if the brain were to decide it was the most important organ in the body and started mining the liver. You know? So clearly showing some kind of a psychological problem, I'm sure you'll agree. And so my work has continued to be the protection of rainforests and helping to try to regenerate areas that have already been destroyed, but more and more focusing on trying to understand and to address this psychological or spiritual ailment that allows us to do such foolish things. Paul Ehrlich said we are sawing off the branch that we're sitting on. You know, something that we should stop doing, I think. Deep ecology suggests that the fundamental problem is the illusion of separation between ourselves and the living earth, that we, through thousands of years of conditioning, through this idea that we are the crown of creation and the measure of all being, this anthropocentric arrogance that lets us think that only man was created in God's image, only man has a soul, everything else is here to be subdued and dominated and to be in fear and trembling of us, has resulted in us having a very shallow identity, what Joanna Macy called, we have become skin-encapsulated egos and been unable to understand the wider context, the biological fabric within which our lives are woven. And so I feel that Gaia Theory and deep ecology have been very important for me to get my bearings, to align myself with a deeper truth from which my actions could spring forth. Thank you.
What is Gaia? As the three panelists demonstrate, there are different ideas about Gaia. To some, Gaia is Mother Earth. To others, Gaia is the planet as a living organism. James Lovelock was asked by NASA to design an instrument that would detect life on Mars. He noted that the reactive atmosphere of Earth was an anomaly. Earth should have an atmosphere of carbon dioxide similar to Mars and Venus, but it does not. Lovelock hypothesized that life regulates conditions on Earth, and if that were so, life has done it for a very long time. Lovelock's Gaia theory postulates a biotic planetary regulatory system. Over 30 million types of extant organisms, descendant from common ancestors and embedded in the biosphere, directly and indirectly interact with one another and with the environment's chemical constituents. They produce and remove gases, ions, metals, and organic compounds through their metabolism, growth, and reproduction. These interactions in aqueous solution lead to modulation of the Earth's surface temperature, acidity, alkalinity, and the chemically reactive gases of the atmosphere, including water. Lovelock's neighbor, author William Golding, suggested the name Gaia after the Greek goddess of the earth. Gaia theory has generated new observations, analyses, and discoveries about how the world is made habitable for people by other life forms, most of them bacteria.
I'll tell you about an exhibit in the Boston Aquarium. I don't know if it's still there, but it was there for many, many years. It was the Boston Harbor when they opened, early 1970s, in one aquarium window. And a comparable, exactly the same size, you've seen it, an aquarium window, the same size, a tank behind it, exactly the same size, large tank. And we had the Boston Aquarium, the Boston Harbor now, and the Boston Harbor 200 years ago. Health and pollution, that's how it was labeled. And you looked at the health of 200 years ago, and it was swarming with fish. Ones people like to eat, cod and all sorts of things that grow off there. Mackerel in schools, and lots of seafood, quahogs. It was the quahogs that brought me to Boston, not the men. But it was just teeming with delicious life and lots of algae. And on the other side, there were Coke bottles, cans, and there was old tires. And the first impression you had is, and it said on the bottom, nothing alive, dead. So what is the parable? You've already maligned the organisms that keep the planet going. And when I looked closely, it was full of life. Not the kind of life sports fishermen want. Not the kind of life that can bring algae that you can extract for agar and ice cream, carrageenan and those things. There was all kinds of teeming life, absolutely necessary to recycle the waste, to produce the oxygen, and to do all sorts of things we take for granted and think what you just said, ugh, antibacteria, kill them, get rid of them. So as a chauvinist, for bacteria a little bit, and for Protoctus even more, those are algae and slime molds and water molds and diatoms and dinoflagellates and all 50 groups, 250,000 species now, and maybe something like 99% of them that have ever lived and have a fossil record are extinct. So we're talking about millions of organisms, all of which are degraded as germs, basically. Now, Gaia is many of the things you say, and it does resonate with us, but it's a scientific idea too. And insofar as we don't use both our feelings and our rational approach, we can't understand this thing of which we are part. Now, the Earth is not an organism. And I think that this is part of the problem. No organism is known that produces feces and urine or their equivalent, that breathes out carbon dioxide or whatever gas breathes out, and then eats those things and uses that air as fresh air. No organism does that. So one of the crucial points about Gaia is that diversity is not just a ladies' garden club ideal, and it's not just something very lovely, like what you've described, but diversity is absolutely necessary, or we are drowning in feces and urine, because it is absolutely necessary that those things be recycled. And the organisms that recycle them are not the same organisms, as you know in the human case, that produce them. So that diversity is wonderful intrinsically, but it's absolutely essential to Gaia. And those things that we hate all the time, those bacteria and those scum, I think it's scum, mud, what else do we call it? Ooze. Give me some more names. What? Gunk, goop, gunk. Yeah, that stuff. Slime. Oh, slime is a lecture. Slime is incredible. Without slime, there would not be any of the shells of the shelled animals, and there's just a whole thing about slime. Slime is a great answer, and the slime molds are a great answer. At any rate, those things which, because they tended to eat our food, and they tended to make little infections on our babies, that also is an evolutionary response. Scientifically, one can defend 5 kinds of organisms, the plants and animals of which we have spoken, the bacteria, these Protoctus, that I am the only one who says power to the Protoctus, because no one knows what it means. And then the last one are the fungi, molds, mushrooms, yeast, which I think, do you think they're plants? Do you think they're plants? When you say healing by those organisms.
Yeah, I kind of think.
Yeah, sure, because they're not animals. There's classifications are for different purposes, of course, and traditionally they have been called plants. But anyway, I'd say that the folk classification still, in the lack of recognition of the importance of these organisms for Gaia, the folk classification is animals, yeah, our friends, our pets, our food. Plants, we've just had beautiful articulate statements about plants. And germs. And then I was corrected. No, the folk classification is plants, animals, germs, and people. The concept that people are animals has not yet hit Western civilization. That's how bad it is. And in fact, people didn't, not only are they not animals, people are not animals, but they're not even classifiable because they are a little bit lower than the angels. And of course, you pointed out the root of the problem. The root of the problem is bringing me to Reg Morrison. Reg Morrison wrote a book that's called Plague Species in Australia, and he couldn't get it published for 3 or 4 years because they didn't see any market for it. But there was no market for it here either, but I strongly recommend it for an overview. The book in the United States and Canada is called The Spirit in the Gene, Humanity's Proud Illusion, and the Laws of Nature. And he asks only one question, but he asks it in many ways. Now, what is he? He's an outback photographer. So he's watched the forests go down. There weren't any forests for most of the places he studied. Anyway, this is his book. His book was, why is it that we have the chimpanzees and people have 99.9% of the DNA in common. The cytochrome C, these respiratory enzymes, 100% of the molecules exactly the same in all chimps and all people. Why is it that chimps have maybe 10,000 population in Africa, something like that, in zoos? Doesn't matter really. And we have 6,000 million. Now that's not a DNA problem. That's an issue that he analyzes, and I think he does a very nice job. I think it's a little too neo-Darwinist for me in places, and I've got some comparison. But for an overall view, he's not a scientist. He's the first person to say that. I'm a photographer from the outback, and I want to know why we continue to destroy the habitat that supports us in every way. Why do we continue to pollute the atmosphere so that we can breathe in the toxins? I just want to know why that is. And what he's trying to say is that the body-mind is one. It's not an angel. It's a primate. And the primates that succeed in expanding their territory and their habitat leave more offspring, namely us. And the way Gaia works is Gaia is a stable system. And when organisms outgrow and destroy their habitat, they simply go extinct, and he shows how that's exactly the course that we are on. That's his question, and he has a lot of answers. He looks at the selection pressure for the kind of people that took over those indigenous cultures, that ripped out the plants before they found out what they can do in the way of healing, and that instituted this technological culture, and it has so much to do, of course, with our attitudes. And I'll let Mark Twain say the last word. The world was made for man. I don't know. Thank you.
So it certainly is a wisdom circle to inspire and to move us. And so the second question, which will affect how we can live our lives aligned with this. In light of this understanding of planetary interdependence, how can individuals and communities best move forward with hope in an age of dramatic ecological disturbances? So we'll start.
I guess where I'd like to start is that I feel that because we are no other than the living earth, we are part of this, we are inextricably embedded in nature, we have no independent existence. Biological metaphors serve us better than mechanical metaphors. So rather than spaceship Earth or anything like that, the metaphor I'd like to draw out is one that was introduced to me through these two elderly sisters in Sydney called by the name of Bradley, and they created a method of regenerating native bush, which is known after them as the Bradley method, and which is quite popular. And what they found was that when, if you'd like to have the native species and the native intelligence of a place return after it's been damaged in any way, or even after it's been destroyed, that no heroic measures are necessary of planting huge numbers of trees or anything like that. That basically what you have to do is to be able to recognise both the native plants and the exotic plants, both from when they first appear out of the ground as tiny seedlings to when they're fully grown. And the method consists of pulling out the exotics without treading on the natives. And it's a sort of a humble thing to do compared to, you know, like I planted 100,000 trees today or anything like that. But the interesting thing about it in this context is that there's one further rule that if you have an area that you're managing in this way, then the temptation is always to try and repair the place which is the most severely damaged. And this doesn't work. That what you actually have to do is to find the strongest expression of native vigour that's taking place. If the whole area is a park that's been mowed for 100 years, but there's a little corner that the mower couldn't get to, and there's a few annual weeds straggling through, or, you know, the beginnings of, you know, like some pioneer species succession, then you start from there. You start from the strongest area, and you start removing the things that are hindering that. Removing the goats or removing the fire or whatever it is that's preventing that from becoming stronger, and slowly year after year you back out of that area, allowing it to grow, and eventually after some years maybe through the microclimate that's created by the pioneer species, maybe through the mulch of the leaves that they drop, or maybe some birds drop some seeds, or maybe they've been waiting in the ground for 100 years for the right conditions, but eventually the pioneer species come up by themselves, and every year it grows stronger, and so by the time you reach the badly damaged area, the whole system is strong enough to be able to deal with that, whereas if you start in the badly damaged area, it's not going to work. And you know, what the Bradley method suggests is that preaching to the choir or something like that is exactly what we need to be doing, that we need to be strengthening the strongest areas, that those places where people already have some understanding, that that's the place that we need to create as much strength and vibrancy and community there. So I guess what I'd like to, my answer to the question is community, and getting together with like-minded people and working together. And it doesn't really matter where that community is, in that, you know, someone was saying the other day that when wildflowers repopulate an area, they start in patches and then those patches expand. And, you know, so there's a vast area of the human psyche, of the human soul, which has been totally, you know, clear-felled by corrupt thinking processes, you know, just this whole idea of the only valuable thing is human beings, and anything else only has value as a resource for human beings. Nothing else has any intrinsic value except human beings. These kinds of things are the exotics that need to be removed. And when we remove those false ideas, we don't actually need to plant the real ideas, because the real ideas is what's left. The real ideas is what spontaneously arises when you remove that arrogance and when you remove that foolishness. So I guess that's where I'd like to start.
The human body just dead looks very like one still alive, but something invisible has left it. In writing as in life, as Robert Bly comments, it is the invisibles that make all the difference. When we approach understandings of planetary interdependencies, we of necessity begin to work with invisibles, things that cannot be found in any of the parts that make up what is being studied. And this is why reductionism is so patently unsuited to the task. We have to begin to see, as Thoreau insisted, with the unworn sides of our eyes, must begin to use the parts of ourselves that are suited to working with invisibles. In the crafting of words, whether accidentally or intentionally, some invisible thing is put in there by the writer, and we have the capacity to feel that invisible thing. We need no special training to do so. Now, if this capacity is turned outward toward the natural world instead of toward man-made things like writing, we find that the world is also filled with meaning. Meanings laid down long before the emergence of our species, and as we encounter those meanings, a complex symphony of feelings occurs within us in response. If you just look closely at what is in front of you, immerse yourself in sensory noticing, and then ask yourself, how does it feel? A moment of contact is initiated. There is, in fact, a rich exchange that occurs. Meaning flows into me from the world. I feel feelings in response, and then something flows from me back out into the world. This experience, when it is talked about at all, is commonly denigrated as anthropomorphizing, but it is not. Rather, those that denigrate the experience are engaging in mechanomorphizing, the projection onto nature of the merely mechanical. And believe me, we have a lot more in common with plants than cars. The impact of that denigration has a great deal to do with both hope and hopelessness. There's a poem I recite many times a year as I teach. It's by a German poet, Norbert Mayer. Just now a rock took fright when it saw me. It escaped by playing dead. As the meaning of that poem moved into you, many of you laughed. There was a childlike joy in the room. And in that joy, there is a hopefulness that just happens of its own accord. Feels good, doesn't it? It occurs because the poem reminds us of something that we have long known to be true, that the world is alive and intelligent and aware. Just being reminded of it brings a hopefulness automatically. Now contrast that with something Ken Wilber has said. The only thing that you and your rock can share together is that you both fall at the same rate. As the meaning within that penetrates, how you feel changes. And if you sit with it long enough, you'll find that some spark of life leaves, and with it that hopefulness that so automatically was here before. Reductionism itself, seeing the world as unrelated bits, denigrates the most essential part of what it means to be human, our capacity for empathic contact with the other life forms on this planet, and our recognition that whether bacteria or mammal, they are alive and aware and intelligent and capable of communication. All of us and the work we do are part of those invisibles. So I will end with something Walt Whitman said a long time ago: be not discouraged, keep on. There are divine things well enveloped, I swear to you. There are divine things more beautiful than words can tell.
The fact is that the species of vertebrates and mammals, judging from the fossil record, have from 1 million to 13 million years of existence. Not a single species from the Cambrian is alive today. So that whether we like it or not, we have maybe 1 million years to go or so. So the question is how? It looks from recent evidence that there were 20 or so homos. We are Homo sapiens. We literally won out. There was Homo ergaster, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, and about 16 others. And they are not here anymore. Just like the chimps are not going to be here anymore, because we have these aggressive policies that have succeeded in running, not decimating, but actually extinguishing what we consider the competition. It's how we're going to go extinct. It's inevitable. According to Morrison, the Earth can support 1.5 billion. It's already got 6 billion. So it's very nice of us in a room like this, well-fed, well-groomed, and healthy for the most part, and happy, to say, go visit a tree or walk on a walkway in the Amazon, but we do it at the expense of lots of other people. And the question is the kind of demise. You know as well as I don't predict the future. I have a hard enough time reconstructing the past. But the inevitability of the extinction of this great being made in the image of that God in the sky brings me to the last point I wanted to make about Morrison's ideas, and that is, it is this delusion that we are invincible, that we are best, that we are superior, and that we can command and win over nature, that has gotten us where we are. The real question is to how to reduce the population by at least 90%. So you think about the ways of doing it. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen probably quicker with the climate changes. But the Gaia hypothesis doesn't really involve people directly. What it says is that our planet is very different from Mars and Venus, and the differences can be understood by the cycling of matter that's due to life, all different kinds of life. So what's staying constant is the system. So you could say that Gaia is a set of ecosystems where the cycling must be complete. In other words, you start with carbon dioxide, and it must be so-called fixed. It has to be converted into all kinds of organic compounds and end up back as carbon dioxide. Now, you take that for nitrogen. It's in the air. We can't use it at all. We're completely dependent, not on plants, but bacteria inside plants and bacteria by themselves, to take that nitrogen, to convert it into something that is edible to us. So an ecosystem, by definition, has to do all these conversions, these chemical conversions, so that things cycle completely. And as I was saying before, an ecosystem of one kind of animal or one kind of plant is not an ecosystem. You've got to have the diversity to do that. So some people would say, and maybe they're right, that the smallest ecosystem on Earth is Gaia, because there isn't an absolute, even those deep sea animals they're using oxygen that's generated at the surface. So, I mean, I think we have to have systems way of thinking. And the thing about systems is that you can't privilege the parts. You can't, because it's not a system. A system depends on a lot of interacting parts. It makes me apoplectic when they say, oh, Gaia is this sort of female science. I was introduced times like that. She does female science, and that it's a goddess, and it's the goddess of the earth. And what's the hypothesis? Well, it's the hypothesis that the earth is an organism. And I mean, and I said that to Jim many times. Why do you go around saying it's an organism? Because you alienate the scientists who would work with us, you know? And he said, because if it's even worse, the rest of them are saying the earth's a pile of rocks. And if it's a pile of rocks, who cares if you kick it? It's true that if it's just a pile of rocks, it by common consent has no feelings. So let them think that it's a goddess that's better than them thinking that it's dead. I disagree, because I think that it does disservice masquerading as science when that's not scientific. But we have agreed to disagree, and he is much more effective than I am at getting his views across. Yeah.
And I want to just give some thanks. I want to thank ACTV for videoing this, and we're not sure what form it will be, but we've recorded these, and it will be available. And I also want to thank the Catalyst Kumbaka, who are making this wonderful tea from right up here in Shutesbury, and they have some samples out there. And the Greenfields Co-op, who brought us some of their better organic juices and water and cookies that are out there, and you're welcome. And every cent that we make will go towards the rainforest protection. And there are books that Stephen has brought, and John has brought a lot of CDs and things. So they're there, and there's all kinds of material, particularly from Sacred Earth Network, Hitchcock Center, and Earthlings out there. So please go with that, and you're welcome to join this sort of network that we are continually expanding. And thank you so, so much for coming this evening. Very excellent.
Responsibility to be in harmony with the surrounding nature. Responsibility to be in harmony with the surrounding nature. Responsibility to be in harmony with the surrounding nature. Responsibility to be in harmony with the surrounding